Hi there. Welcome. It's Friday afternoon, November 1st. Yeah. I have a bunch of things I want to talk about, but I'm going to break them up in several videos. This particular one here, I'm just going to talk about, uh, I'll just talk about it instead of tell you what I'm going to talk about. I'll just talk about it. It starts back in 1988. The first spiritual book I ever read was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. You might have heard about this book or read it yourself. Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda. Uh, he wrote the book in the early 1920s and tells his story from India and then eventually moving to Southern California, opening up Self-Realization Fellowship, which I attended, Georgianne and I, in Encinitas, California. And that was his story. Well, in his story, his spiritual lineage goes back to his guru was a guy named Sri Yukteswar, and that was his guru. Sri Yukteswar's guru was a guy named Lahiri Mahasaya. Lahiri Mahasaya's guru was a guy named Babaji. So that goes back several generations, spiritual and biological generations. Uh, Now, this is just tell it like I know it to be. Whether you believe me or not, it's your call. Babaji is still alive today. He's an ascended master, and back in the 90s, uh, and you can check, you can look him up today. You go Google Babaji. He is said to be anywhere between, I think it's 600 to 800 years old, and he's still in the human body. The fact that he is an ascended master, he can control his body. He can control what the image that he presents to the world, to the 3D world, and everybody's five senses in the 3D world. So he's been in the human body for well over 600 years, and he looks like he's about 22 years old. That's the image he portrays, is a very androgynous 22-year-old Indian person. So that's Babaji. Okay, now the next step is, I think it was the second video when I shared with uh, my leaving the Christian church and meeting, and then my story of how I've met and interacted with Sananda Kumara, who is the being that incarnated as Jesus of Nazareth 2,000 years ago, and my personal interaction with Sananda Kumara. And I shared about when he came through the channeling session in the early 90s in Lemon Grove, California. Well, what I didn't share, and I will share now, is Babaji also made an appearance in that channeling session in Lemon Grove, California. And Babaji was speaking to me in this channeling, me specifically, and he did a demonstration, and it was witnessed by Georgianne and the two practitioners there at the channeling. He did this demonstration to prove to me and to them, but more specifically to me, that he was present and that he was present. And here's what he did. After he identified himself and told me a few things, he basically said, move your feet. Because I'm sitting there in the chair like I am now, and the table, the TV tray, like it's right in front of me that we were using in the table tipping channeling. My feet were flat on the ground, and he told me through the channeling, he told me, move your feet. So I tried to move my feet, and I could not move my feet. Both of my feet were planted solidly to the floor, and with all the straining of my muscles, I could not move my feet. And the other three beings, Georgianne and the two practitioners, they witnessed this whole thing. They heard him instruct me to try to move my feet, and they watched me try to move my feet, and I couldn't. Then the next thing he said, okay, now try to move your feet. Then the second time he said, try to move your feet, I was able to freely move my legs and my feet like I am right now. And he told me that was a demonstration to me that he is present in my life. And he identified himself in my life at that time as as one of my spiritual guides. So I've gone through all of my awakening, my spiritual awakening and evolution with the knowledge that this ascended master, Babaji, was one of my spiritual guides. Okay, now we're going to fast forward to uh, right after I retired, the spring of 2017. And I shared with you how I would hang out in the garden, my garden in the backyard, and that I knew in my knowing that the garden was a trans-dimensional laboratory. And that's where I pretty much hung out all day. Well, one day when I was out in the garden, sitting in my chair by the avocado tree, and I was meditating, and I felt this presence just press on my chest. And it just and I shared this in a couple of videos ago. This presence just, it felt like a hand just laying on my chest, just admonishing me to just be, to just breathe and just be. Because there was what I was going through in that meditation. I was getting excited. I started hyperventilating. I could feel my pulse and respiration start increasing, because what was happening is, in my mind's eye, I was like there was a doorway, and there was like a little foyer between me where I was and then the foyer and then the doorway. And there was a presence on the other side of that doorway. And I knew I could sense very strongly this presence. And it's like I'm like freaking out, because like the little me's going, am I getting ready to meet higher self? Am I going to consciously meet higher self? And I mean, all of a sudden I just started breathing, hyperventilating, my respiration, and my blood pressure kicked up, and the whole 9 yards. And then I felt this presence right in the center of my chest, just calmly lay on my chest and admonish me to just be, just calm down and just be. So I calmed down, and I got to that place of, okay, I'm good. But I'm still that presence in the doorway, in the little hallway, the foyer, and the doorway, and that presence behind the doorway. And it wasn't just like, oh, I knew somebody was there. It was like I had a sense that if I opened the door, I was going to be blown away by the immensity of the presence. Or that at any moment, the presence behind the door was just going to blow the door down and just knock me off my feet, figuratively, you know, uh, knock me off my feet. So after I was admonished to calm down by that calming presence, I realized I recognized that presence. And in my memory, I remember that presence was the same presence I felt when Babaji interacted with my physical body and told me to when he held my feet still on the floor back in the early 90s in that channeling session. So I just looked at the doorway and I asked, "Who are you?" And I heard just as loud and clear, but very strongly, with not forcefully like "Bah!" but very powerfully, I heard and felt Babaji, just like not Babaji, Babaji, and it was like wow, because that's the presence that I remember and recognized from almost 25 years earlier, and now I asked, "Who are you?" and the presence confirmed that that's who that was. So now, just a couple nights ago, I'm laying in bed, falling asleep, and all of that came back to me. The whole thing that I just shared with you came back to me, and it was pointed out to me that all these years I have been struggling with I've been struggling with a concept, and the struggle was through one of my distortional structures that I've been operating through and thought I was done with that, but it was pointed out to me and illustrated to me that no, I had not completely worked my way through that distortional structure, and that distortional structure was the lie of unworthy. What I have been going through all these years on a very unconscious level was deeming myself unworthy to have Babaji as my higher self. And I have kind of toyed with the idea on the periphery of the idea over the years, occasionally, not something I dwell on, just every once in a while, I would visit that concept. And it was like, but I'd only stay on the periphery because it was just like way more than the little me could deal with. The little me just didn't think he was worthy, or that whoever I am, was worthy of this ascendant master, Babaji, been on the planet for well over 800 years, 600 years at least, and still in a human body. And this is my higher self. And then the question is, well, how can he be on the planet and be my higher self? Well, I don't know who higher self is or where higher self is, or that, if Babaji is an ascended master, then yes, I concede and accept the possibility that he can be on the planet himself, and me an aspect of his multidimensional self, or me an aspect of his multidimensional self. I think I came out right on the planet at the same time, because I have accepted the possibility that there can be multiple aspects of my multidimensional self on the planet right now. One day I was driving down the road and I was going through this whole concept of simultaneous incarnations of your multidimensional aspects in the same quote now time along the linear timeline. And I'm driving down the road and I'm looking at it and I'm talking to Zio and Raluan. And at one point, Zio goes, "I never said that you were the only incarnation on the planet right now." And that took me aback because no, he never said that. Raluan never said that. Nobody's ever told me that you can only have one incarnation of your multidimensional aspect on the planet at the same time within the linear timeline. That was an assumption the small me had made through my mental body operating within the linear timeline. But outside of the linear timeline, who's to say that can't be true? Who's to say that the big me couldn't have multiple aspects of itself along the linear timeline, like here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one along the linear timeline? But who's to say that the big you can't have, like, let's just use three veiled aspects of itself in the same time frame along the linear timeline? We here can't say that. We don't have any, we're not, we don't know enough. I know I don't know enough to say, oh, that can't possibly be true. Who am I? I don't know shit. The one thing I learned more than anything else in my awakening, the more I know, the more I realize how much I don't know. And which is why I can't argue anything with anybody, because I don't know. I can't say that that's not possible. And Zeal specifically said to me while I'm driving down the road, I remember exactly where I was, westbound on Interstate 80, going through Wyoming, going through Rock Springs, Wyoming. When that was said to me, I was having this conversation, and Zeal said, "I never said that you were the only incarnation on the planet right now." And I looked at that and went, "Oh shit, you did never did say that. That was an assumption on my part." An erroneous assumption on my part, or a baseless, I don't know if erroneous, but for sure a baseless assumption, because I didn't have anything to base that assumption on, any empirical evidence to base that assumption on. So that's back to Babaji. So the other night, when this whole thing was brought back to my awareness, I laid there in bed and I did a rescinding a vow. And this is it. I'm going to share it with you. I formally rescind any and all vows that I or anyone in the body has ever made in this or any other lifetime or any other time, space, or dimension has ever made about I'm unworthy to be of the lineage of Babaji. I rescind the vow that I am unworthy to have Babaji as my quote higher self. And then I just laid there in bed, felt all this energy rising out of me, all this distortional structures leaving me. So then I said, I send to the light any and all energies, entities, mechanisms, or distortional structures that have supported or maintained those vows. And all of that, I just felt all this energy rising out of me out of the bed. And just in my mind's eye, just sent it to the light. Just sent it to the light. And then I said, I request from my spirit new pictures of reality, insights and awarenesses, and new divine structures to replace those vows. And so it is. And that was about 2 or 3 nights ago. And it's taken me that much time to, like I said before, it doesn't happen instantaneous, but organically, things start changing in your perspective, in your pictures of reality, to where I was now able to share this, that anything's possible. Who are we to say no? So I am now a lot more comfortable with embracing the reality that the being known as Babaji is the big me, or an aspect of my, or he is positively a larger aspect of my multidimensional self. Because he told me that 2.5 years ago. He identified himself to me, and he identified himself to me 25 years ago that he was involved with me. And I realized in retrospect, in hindsight, that 25 years ago he identified himself as as one of my spiritual guides, because at that time the little me just absolutely was not even ready to embrace that I'm embracing now. So that's the one thing I want to share in this video. I feel a lot better. I feel so much, I just feel a lot better. There's less anxiety. It's because believe me, like I've shared before, when I first shared, this technology, rescinding the vows. Most of the stuff the vows are unconscious. You can't know what you don't know. So hopefully you're doing these technologies, you're doing the rescinding the vows, and things will change. I'm personal experience, living proof. Because, like I said, just this something that's been in the back of my field for a long, long time, and I wasn't really ready to deal with it until just a couple nights ago, couple 2 or 3 nights ago. It was time for me to deal with it. So it was brought up into my consciousness and said, okay, let's look at this. And we did. So anyway, love you all. Blessings on your journey, and I will talk to you soon. Bye bye.